I genuinely love this story. I'm also reminded that many, many years ago, Mahatma Gandhi had a very famous saying. He's like, there are some people in this world that are so hungry, so destitute of compassion and justice, that they can only see God in a loaf of bread. Meaning that our words are one thing and our deeds carry so much more weight. And that could be a good message, that could be a good lesson for what it is that we're talking about this morning. But in this very unique story, the story found only in the Gospel of Luke, we have something really powerful, mystical, almost inexplicable taking place. We have two disciples, only one of whom is named, Cleopas, and you'd be forgiven if you're like, I don't remember Cleopas. Hang on a sec. Andrew, Bartholomew, Matthew, Peter, Philip, Simon, Thaddeus, Thomas, James, John, James, Judas. No Cleopas. But they also talk about the women. So whenever we do communion, remember, I like to start it always by saying he was with his disciples, family members, friends. So the story reminds us that there are a lot of people we don't necessarily know about that were in Jesus' inner circle, that were very devastated by what had taken place. And so these two, unlike the other disciples who were hiding still at this point, they were heading to another village. And I'm always curious, what sticks out when we hear this story? Do we think about the walk? It specifically says it's about 7 miles. So it's a substantial walk. It's a day's walk. For all of us, that's probably way more than a day's walk. Not too many of us are going to do 7 miles. But of course, in that time and place, this is pretty standard. And what I love about this too is Jesus begins with a question, as he did so much in his public ministry. Very innocuous questions. I don't think they were ever setting up a trap. I think it was trying to get to what people are honestly reflecting upon. Something we wrestle with here all the time. Something I'm struck with is sometimes within, and this is not a condemnation in any capacity, but we end up in a community, and because we're end up in a community, communities have written and unwritten rules, and sometimes we fear if we say or do the wrong thing, how will the rest of the community look on us? And so there's parts of ourselves that we shield. And I think that's fair. Even Jesus himself only had 2 or 3 really close friends that he shared a lot with. Other people saw less of who he was. Not to say that he was hidden, but to say that he understood the hearts of people. He understood what to reveal. And he understood the importance of teaching is to genuinely ask questions and to genuinely listen to the responses. So they're walking on this road, and Creator Sets Free walks up next to them and asks them what's going on. And their first response is like, oh, you must be coming from a far away because the city's had a major event happen. And then they explain what they understood. We thought this guy was going to set us free from the people of iron, the Romans, the dogs, as they called them, the alien foreign oppressors. So all the times we get who Jesus is wrong, take comfort in that. His closest people still thought this was a political move. They still thought this was somebody who was going to help them recapture the nationalism of Israel at that time as they understood it. Even all the ways that Jesus had told them, even all the ways he talked to them about how that was not really what he was doing, it was so much deeper. They still were there like, we thought. But that's not how it played out. And he becomes just one more wannabe Messiah put to death by the all-powerful Roman Empire. And so Jesus, Creator Sets Free, begins with a question. He's like, don't you understand that this chosen one, this was supposed to happen to the chosen one? How did you forget that? And then spends what we can only assume is a substantial amount of time talking to them, walking them through all the scriptures they'd known since childhood, all the ways in which they've been taught about the Messiah, and giving them, as he did again in his public ministry, other ways to look at it, deeper ways to understand what it is they thought they knew. And still, no recollection, no revelation of resurrection. I did not mean that to be such a good alliteration. No recollection or revelation of resurrection. Oh, that's what I should have called this message. Seeing God. Disappointed in myself. Anywho, so through all this, hours together, teaching together, walking together, everything Jesus had done with these people in his life and ministry. So many clues. And then he goes to walk on. And in a beautiful act of hospitality, and I really want to say this, In Cleopas and this other disciple, I want us to see ourselves, as I always want to see ourselves when humans are interacting with Jesus. It's sacred buffoonery. And that's for a reason. And I want to credit the disciples as well we need to include this so that others who hear this story fully understand how their own ignorance, how their own getting it wrong is in no way, shape, or form an impediment. And sometimes I think the Christian message and the Christian churches and our structures forget that what makes us good news is our own missing the point becomes sacred because of who Jesus is. And opens us up to these moments where we can be a little bit more than we think we're even capable of. And so in that moment, Jesus is going to walk on. And they say, oh, stay with us, because the sun's going to set. The road is about to get dangerous. We're in the town now. Let's stay in for structure. This is why we talk about hospitality as not just a spiritual gift, but at that point in time, literally saved people's lives, kept them safe from animals, robbers, etc. So Jesus agrees. They offer him hospitality. They go. They sit down for the meal. More conversations take place. But it's not until he breaks the bread. Something about that action. And there's lots of scholarly theories. There's lots of pastoral messages. And this is why I want to embrace the mystery at this point. Something about that. Sure, it could have just be as simple as they just Thursday and now it's Sunday. They just remember him doing this, what we now call the Eucharist or Communion or Lord's Supper. Of course, at the time it was the Passover. Maybe just the way he did it triggered their memory. Fair enough. But in all the stuff and all the time they just spent with him, nothing had happened until he broke the bread. Suddenly, immediately, a new vision, an understanding of who they've been walking with, and then gone. This is a mystical story, friends. This is a magical story, if you'll forgive and permit the word. But this is a powerful story because they've gone 7 miles out of town, and these two disciples are immediately inspired to run back and share with the apostles, the disciples, what they had seen too. And so I leave this with us, and why I do believe communion is so important, and why I'm so reticent to truly nail down and define what it actually is. Because at best, you're going to get my scholarship, which any other scholar is going to have and take apart. Any other Christian tradition could be like, but actually, and you know what? Fair enough, they're right too. And even if I were to include so much depth and so much thinking, at best, you're getting just my perspective. And I think in some ways, I'm shortcutting what it actually is. It's a moment of revelation between you and your Lord. It's a moment of clarity. Will it happen every Sunday that we do it? Of course not. And can moments of revelation be, obviously, bam, as soon as you know, it's gone. But what you do next is kind of everything. And that's the power of gospel stories. In this moment, it means one thing, but how you carry it with you means everything. Set free to be and engage in sacred buffoonery, to make your mistakes, to be so sure about something that you understand this. This is what this is. And through God's grace, we've all lived quite a while. Through God's grace, we can look back at what we thought was so true 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Be like, oh my goodness. It's the gift of living long. To look back and be like, oh, look how far I've traveled. I hope you look back at previous self and have moments of embarrassment. That means you're growing. Doesn't mean you're better, just means you're older. And if you've been paying attention, maybe a little wiser. Because you know what I love to say about wisdom? It's that thing you get right after you needed it. You're like, oh, sometimes we learn that way. So the next time you're like, oh, that little metal coil is red. That's a very specific story, which would lead you to believe that maybe that's happened to me. You would be correct. But it's happened to all of us. So the story of Cleopas and the disciple is that. It's a beautiful, mystical story of Jesus' revelation, which apparently does not always come from a deeper understanding of even the Bible. Apparently doesn't always come even with a close physical walk with Jesus, but comes in a moment that seems innocuous, silly, not anything big. And that's the moment that changes everything. And that is what the gospel is. An ongoing story that any moment can become that sacred moment. Suddenly. Amen, amen.